Our next presentation is by Tara Dempsey. And Tara is a real champion nest finder. She finds nests of birds, particularly those that go into long grass in woodlands or in hollow trees. And she came to us because she's been studying the Redstarts in the New Forest, and she wanted to find out exactly how they were getting on. And you can't get your head inside the hole of a Redstart, but you can get an endoscope in, and we bought one that she could use. So to hear about that, please welcome Tara Dempsey.
Thanks, Keith. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Okay, so I'm here to give you a very short summary on some of the work that I've been doing on Redstarts in the New Forest for a few years now. So just to set some context, we haven't got much time today, so I'm really going to concentrate on some of the results and not go too much into the methodology or what we're actually doing to find the nests. So I thought I'd give you a high-level summary of the project so far, and then also just to have give you a little bit of a snippet about some of the further research that I actually want to do on Redstarts now that I've got quite taken by them. So where the project really came from was that I'd been doing quite a lot of nesting for quite some time in the New Forest. In 2020, I found a couple of monitorable redstart nests because I spent a lot of time looking for redstart nests, finding out they were 10 metres up trees. You could get no data. All you could tell was that there was a nest there and that they were feeding young. So it told you something about the location of the nest site selection. It told you something about the timing of the nest, but that was all you could do. Now, in 2020, what really interested me was that I found 3 nests that I could get data for, and all of the brood sizes were 6 or 7 chicks, which is pretty healthy. The other nests that talking to fellow nesters had elsewhere in Hampshire were actually much lower brood sizes, and so that really caught my curiosity. I had, before this time, been helping Tony Davis on lots of wood warbler nests, and unfortunately, obviously, as you know, wood warblers weren't doing so well, so I found it was like time to set up my own project, and then just because Redstarts are so beautiful and such an enigmatic species, piqued with this interest in sort of like the brood sizes, I decided to really concentrate my effort on those. So I've been doing nest records for the BTO for some years now, and for those of you that haven't done nesting and don't sort of record data, it might just be helpful at this stage if I tell you some of the data that we do collect when we find a nest. So I'm looking very much at how many eggs has it laid, what's the clutch size. Of that, then what's your brood size? So are you having infertile eggs that don't hatch? Are you losing one for a part predation event? How many chicks are actually then sort of like dying in the nest? How many are fledging? What's the outcome? We also record the nest site selection. So, what tree are the Redstarts choosing to nest in? How high is that nest? What orientation is the hole, what's the wider habitat that tree is actually in. So there's a whole load of data that's collected there for the BTO and that we actually record as part of that data. So I mentioned I really got interested in this in 2020. So in 21, 22 and 23, I really spent a lot of time looking for Redstart nests and have found, with the help of others as well, between 31 and 41 nests in a year. Now, of those, quite decent numbers have actually fledged. But I should say one thing about the way that I'm actually assessing this. You'll see that there's quite a few there where I've said they're unknown. Now, where they're unknown, effectively, you can have, under the BTO scheme, something that's called nest empty, where you've got undisturbed lining and you think they're there. But Redstarts are noisy. If a Redstart nest is fledged, ordinarily you'll hear lots of kind of like buzzing from the chicks because there's 6 or 7 chicks there that, might be wanting feeding. So they're quite vocal about, I'm over here, I want some food. And the adults are obviously very, very vocal in terms of, where you're alarming because they think their chicks are at threat. So I've actually taken quite a prudent view on these ones where they're unknown. If I go to a Redstart territory to find out the nesting success and I don't hear anything, then I'm sometimes putting those as unknown. But sometimes things come right and you find out the ultimate outcome of the nest, like years later. Like last year, I actually found a ringed adult, was able to retrap him, and actually found out it was a nest that I hadn't known the outcome on. So that was really great. So what I wanted to do, just to put this into perspective, is just show you the insight in one nest to try and hopefully bring this alive, because I've got such passion for these birds. There is nothing better than sitting in the New Forest, watching Redstarts bombing around, doing what they do. They're such charismatic little birds, and getting the flash of red tail, in the morning light is just absolutely stunning. I've watched them dive bomb green woodpeckers, have a real go at jays that are trying to predate the nest. They are just fascinating birds to watch, so we're really lucky. So I'm hoping this brings it slightly alive. Oh, I don't know where that's coming from. That's not mine. This is a changing nest site, and I really wish that I had a picture of this before this tree had fallen over. So this nest was actually found at Boulderwood by Jackie Lay, and she'd watched the redstart building this nest in a cherry tree that was upright. Unfortunately, I went back after Maybank holiday, and the tree had either been pushed over or it had fallen over, and the redstart chicks were still inside. So this nest is now changing from a vertical nest to a horizontal nest. But what's quite interesting in this, and I don't know whether you can see, this was the original nest site. And if you look just here, that's actually a second exit. So redstarts quite often select sites where they've got an escape chute. So presumably if a jay comes in and tries to predate a couple of the chicks, the rest of the chicks, if they're old enough, can flee out of the other exit and can get away. Now the adult redstarts were then utilising both of these holes to go in and feed their chicks, which were now spread out in between sort of like the two exits of the nest, so they completely abandoned the nest. Absolutely fascinating. What became even more interesting on this nest was that I realised that the adult male was actually ringed, but this is at the beginning of my project in 2021. So I was able to retrap the adult, and what that actually showed me was that it had been ringed as a nestling. It had been ringed by Tony Davis elsewhere in the New Forest, less than a kilometre away, also close to Boulderwood, and it had been ringed as a nestling there. It's then travelled only 0.6 kilometres to actually have its own nest, where I've actually then caught it feeding its own young in this tree that's fallen over. Meanwhile, it's been to Africa several times. Just absolutely fascinating results. And I've got a few other nests like that, but sadly, in the interest of time, I've got to limit it to one today. So this might just give you a little bit of an indication of some of the typical nests that I'm finding in the New Forest. You see the red arrow, and this was a nest that without the Hoss endoscope, there was no way I'd have got any data on. I'd spent hours trying to find this nest, and when I then finally found out where she was in a really horrible place for me to get to, so I would have got no data at all. But luckily with the endoscope, because it can go up to two sort of like a story house height, I was able to very carefully negotiate the endoscope in and realise that she had a clutch of 7 eggs, which is data we just would not have. Now you can see there's lots of different species of trees here. You've got silver birch, you've got beech, you've got dead holly, live holly, and we've also recorded them in apple, cherry, and other sites. But this was a nest that really threw me, and it took me a long time to find this because I had anchoring bias on the fact that I was convinced this redstart was going to be in a tree. Now I know that northern redstarts in the UK often go in old stone walls, but I wasn't prepared for finding a redstart nest on the ground. I'd watched this adult flying, collecting food. I was convinced she was going to be in the beautiful holes in the trees that were around me up at Acres Down, but no, it was flying onto the floor. I did wonder whether the bird had actually adopted a nest. So I've seen this in a few species before, where if a bird loses its nest, it might adopt another nest because the urge to feed is so strong. And I've seen that both within the same species. I've observed it with willow warbler. I've also seen it between species where actually long-tailed tits had lost their own nest and had actually adopted a set of blue tit chicks and were flying in more food than the blue tits. So I thought maybe this was going on and maybe it was going to be a robin nest or a stonechat nest. But on closer examination of the chick, I could indeed tell it was a redstart chick and the redstart was nesting on the ground. So this is actually the nest site. So you've got like very small holly in a bracken area and the redstart was there. So that's taught me a very important lesson, which is don't expect to know where you think they're going to be nesting. Another strange nest I had was in a squirrel dray where the redstart had, obviously I could not find any information on this one because there's no way even you can get an endoscope into the squirrel dray. But the redstart was flying into the squirrel dray and had her nest up there. Now, we've recorded this twice in the New Forest. One did actually succeed, which I find stunning. The second one failed. I'm assuming the squirrel probably got hungry at some point and unfortunately decided to take those little redstart chicks out. Very disappointing. So I've mentioned that I had constraints to the project, which is very much in terms of you find a nest, you put all this effort into finding it, and then it's like miles up a tree. So the endoscope has really, really helped with that. The other thing that's also been quite helpful is the fact that, the colour ringing at the Redstarts that I started in 2023 is meaning that I can uniquely identify some of these individuals now. And so as a result, I can tell if there's another nearby nest. So it's enabling me to look at nesting density a little bit more and actually look at these things in much more depth than I had been able to before. Now, one of the key things for the endoscope is the fact that not only does it go up to, a two-storey house, but it also means that it's got the ability to beam down by Wi-Fi to actually record what's going on in the nest. Now, if you can see on the right-hand side in this photo, that's a nest of redstart chicks. It's pretty difficult to see how many are in there. And so as a result, actually, the ability to record it on the iPad down at the bottom of the tree, whilst very carefully negotiating it into the nest, means you can then go through frame by frame on the computer at home, counting those beaks to get much better quality data, and also to minimise disturbance, which is ultimately the most important thing, because we have a principle, birds first. Data collection is very important, but the bird always comes first. So in terms of future use, I'm really interested in the fact that sometimes they reuse nest sites. You might see a nest site that's used in 2021. It might then be used in 2023. But is that the same bird? I don't know. And so I'm hoping that the colour ringing here will actually enable me to see that and understand nest fidelity sites much more importantly. It's also enabling me to look at dispersal. So with the birds that I've seen, I've had them move 0.6 kilometres from where they're born to where they're nesting. Another one was about 1.6, 1.7 kilometres. Now, this is where I'm really hoping that some of you in this room might actually be able to contribute to the project in future years. If you're out in the New Forest and you see a colour-ringed redstart, I would absolutely love to hear from you. If you're able to get a photograph, if you're able to, tell me where that bird is, that's going to tell me something more about dispersal, because there's a risk that they're moving further than I think they might be. And sadly, unlike Lizzie, I haven't got any of mine tracked, so I can't actually do any sort of technology on this. So I'm very much down to sightings and photographs. Where I also really want to go with this project is looking at ticks. I've noticed quite a high number of the chicks in certain localities, particularly in beech woodlands, have quite a lot of ticks on them. One poor chick, which was only 7 days old, had 19 ticks on it, which is quite phenomenal. So I'm really interested in trying to identify what this species is and also look to see. It doesn't seem to be stopping them fledging, so that's really good news, but I don't know whether it's having any other health impacts. So that's an area I really, really want to have a look at. So obviously I'll continue to collect all of the base data for the underlying BTO nest record schemes, but looking at this nesting, looking at the bird movements and looking at these ticks is going to be really interesting, I hope, over the next 5 to 10 years. But yes, if you see any colouring birds, please do let me know. So that's all really I've got to say today in the interest of time, but I did just want to say, thank you very much to Effie for letting me do the work in the New Forest, and, the endoscope that Hoss had provided has just been an absolute game changer on this. So a big thank you to Hoss for providing the equipment. Thank you.